Welcome back to J Movie Talk. This is episode 372. I'm talking about taking a Pelham 123, the original from 1974, continuing old school June, and let's kind of jump right into some things regarding this movie. Um, I mean, last week, I talked about It's a Mad, Mad, Mad World, and that was chaos in a fun way. This is a 70s crime thriller that takes place in New York, in the subways of New York, and is chaos in a more controlled and more ironically calm way. I want to almost say after watching this movie. Um, and one thing I did notice about watching this movie is that just how much this movie feels ahead of its time as far as how it plays as a crime thriller. It feels very much ahead of its time, almost like it was more set in today's era, in a sense, which is kind of funny because of the fact that there was a remake that starred Denzel Washington and John Travolta, directed by Tony Scott, and that one I've seen a few times, and I can honestly say after watching this one, because this was a first time watch for me of the original Taking of Pelham 123. But I can say that after watching this one, that this one is the superior film. And that's not a knock against the Tony Scott Denzel Travolta version, but this one, I don't know, I had a lot of fun with this movie. And everything. Um So, one thing I was doing when I did a little research about this is like how much of an influence this movie still has on the crime genre, to a degree. I mean, probably one of the biggest things, of course, is the fact that uh, the the uh, the guys led by Robert Shaw, they all have code names: Mister Blue, Mister Gray, Mister Brown, Mister Green, and everything. And of course, the movie that naturally comes to mind when you think about, you know, criminals having code names that's based around colors is Reservoir Dogs, and everything. But I thought it was very interesting how this movie played, how it felt. It felt very much like New York, and everything. And I can say this now after going a few times and you know being around in the city and everything. This very much felt, you know, very much New York ish, and everything. In a good way, not in a bad way, but in a good way. Um and everything. So my first question I want to ask you guys is what makes a great crime thriller? Is it the characters? Is it the type of crime that's being committed? Like what makes a great crime thriller? And I feel like this one definitely had the makings and is a great crime thriller, and everything. So that's the first question I ask. If you're listening on YouTube, definitely comment down below in the comment section, and everything. Of course, if you listen on Spotify, you can also comment on the episode as you're listening to it, and everything like that. Or if you want to shoot me an email at jmovietalk@gmail.com, you can definitely do that as well. So first impressions on this movie, of course, as I mentioned, this was my first time watching it for the podcast, and I really enjoyed watching this movie. I had a lot of fun with this movie, a lot more fun than I thought I would. And if I'm granted, I do love a lot of movies that's from the 70s and stuff like that. So it wasn't a thing of, oh, it's an older movie and da da da. Nothing like that. It's just because I had never seen it before, so I didn't know exactly what my expectations should be going into it, necessarily. And like I said, I had a lot of fun with it. And interestingly enough, it feels like I say, you feel like you're right there with the characters. You feel like you're on the train, as everything is going down. You feel like, no, these people could die at any moment. Especially dealing with Hector Elizondo's character of Mr. Gray, who was like a loose cannon. You could almost say that Mr. Blonde from Reservoir Dogs is kind of modeled somewhat after him, as he's a loose cannon to a degree. And even Robert Shaw's character, Mr. Blue, he kind of didn't even trust him. But it makes you wonder, like, how did these dudes even get together? I kind of wish they would have delved a little bit into that, like how they all got together, because the only two that seem like they actually like knew each other, really well were Mr. Blue and Mr. Green, who ironically, when I realized who Mr. Green was, it's just like, wait a minute. Um Home Improvement, Mr. Next Door Neighbor, that you never see his face. That's you, and I was like, wait a minute, that's really him. And it's funny, like the fact that you only ever see the top half of his face um in Home Improvement. It's like, so anytime you see that part of him, you instantly know who that person is. Um and yeah, it was kind of interesting seeing him in this movie, because I had never seen him in anything else outside of Home Improvement, and like I say, you really don't see him much in that either. Um, so it was kind of interesting seeing him be like the heavy in a sense in this movie, and I really enjoyed his character. But like I say, him and like Mr. Green, played by Earl Hinderman, um, and Mr. Blue, played by Robert Shaw. I felt like Blue and Brown, they knew each other a little bit before this whole thing, and Blue, he kind of tolerated Mr. Green, and Gray, he was like, I don't know about this guy, um, and everything. Which he wasn't wrong with that assessment. I feel like the pacing of this movie, it actually works in its favor, because even though the movie is an hour and 44 minutes, it actually kind of goes by rather quickly, and it's like a thrill ride almost, especially when they was hijacking the train and everything. That felt like a thrill ride in itself, and you felt bad for those people, especially the ones who end up on the car with them as hostages. Like, like, geez, like this is how my day is going. And I think there's even a part in there like where they like real like, damn, like this is where we at, type of thing. And I don't think there is really an era that is like the 70s when it comes to filmmaking. Especially like when they film in New York. A lot of the movies that took place in the 70s, there's like a different feel to it. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain, but not really. But I think anyone who watches a lot of movies, and if you watch a lot of movies that are from the 70s and set in New York, it's just something different about how it feels, in the city feels like a character. And I think that's one of the things that always works for a lot of the movies from the 70s, is that they they felt like you were right there with them, in the city. And like I said, the city feels like a character in itself, and it felt very real. And like I say, as the movie builds more tension and everything, like I say, you are on the edge of your seat in a sense of watching everything as it unfolds. Um, and also too, nothing really feels like it couldn't happen. Of course, there's a few jokes in the movie about, like, really somebody really hijacked the train. Like, I don't believe that, but it really did happen. And it's like, yeah, this, it could happen, to a extent. So it did feel believable, and all the characters felt believable and like real people. Like, you felt like you were not just watching characters on the screen. You felt like you was watching like real people. Like, if you were somebody who lived in New York and you commute on the train, like, these people feel like people that you probably would run into or just pass by, on your day to day as you're moving around the city and everything. So let's talk about the one of the stars of this movie, who actually was one of my favorites in this movie. And I'm talking about Mr. Walter Matthau, who, of course, when I was growing up as a kid, I watched the grumpy old men movies, Out to Sea, stuff like that with him, and kind of just seeing him, be the funny guy, or even the original Bad News Bears, where he's Buttermaker, and stuff like that. So I never really watched too much stuff with him where he was relatively serious, and this is one of those movies where he's relatively serious. But one thing I liked about his character here, he kind of felt like Columbo in a sense, where like when we first introduced to him, he's he's kind of aloof, in a way, where he's just kind of going through whatever the day is unfolding when he's walking around with the Japanese guys and he's explaining, everything, and he's kind of assuming that they don't speak English, so he started, kind of calling them different names and everything and telling everybody else like they just or whatever. And then the realization when he finds out like no, they spoke English the whole time, and oh, thank you Mr. Garber for such wonderful tour and everything, and the look that's on his face like oh crap. And I always kind of feel like if the in a way the train being hijacked in a way kind of saved his career, I feel, because if the train thing didn't happen, he probably was going to get fired for the nonsense that he pulled with them and everything. But I would say that he's one of the strongest parts of this movie, and I think the movie works a lot because of him, especially from the side of the cop side when everything is going down. He is the one who, and that's why I kind of go back to the whole Columbo thing of where he kind of comes across initially as kind of goofy or whatever, but when everything, goes to hell in a sense and chaos ensues, he's one of the more level-headed people, and he actually figures, quite a bit of stuff out. And then of course that finale that, because it's almost like a running thing with the fact that Mr. Green is always sneezing, and Garber hears it and he's always gazoon type. And in the end, that's what actually got Green caught, was because of the sneeze. And I love that look back through the door where he's like, oh, you done fucked up, right? That's the look he gives. And I love that's how the movie ends and everything. But yeah, Matthau, he gives a great performance here, and I almost dare to say that I enjoy Walter Matthau's Garber more than I actually enjoyed Denzel's. Not saying that Denzel was bad or anything, because I mean, I don't think Denzel can give a bad performance. I mean, he might have been in a few movies where, I mean, he does a terrible British accent, and he gives a serviceable but still kind of shaky Jamaican accent in The Mighty Quinn. And then of course there's Heart Condition, which is like ugh. But and then Virtuosity, which I think as we get even further past that movie, I think people kind of turn around on that movie to some degree. I don't know, maybe I need to revisit it, um but yeah, I feel like Matthau's Garber, like he fits that role. It's like he is that guy. Denzel, it's like it's Denzel. Maybe if Denzel played the Travolta role, maybe it might have been a little different or anything. But I don't know. That's just me kind of, I don't know, thinking outside the box, I guess, and kind of fan casting the remake of Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3. I don't know. Would the movie work better? Would the remake work better if Denzel and Travolta switch roles? Maybe, I don't know. Um, but going back to this version, Garber in this, he's not your traditional, hero or anything. He's not an action hero. He's not your traditional hero. I mean, like I said, he looks like an everyman, really, and he just happens to be the most level-headed, in a stressful situation in a sense. And he's very competent, and we realize that, like, how he's talking, and he's actually getting the right people together, and he's talking very calmly with Mr. Blue when he realizes, like, no, this dude, he's very intense, he's very serious and everything. He actually, like, well, he figures out, like, hey, you know, just know anybody can drive one of these freaking trains. Like, let's take a look at anybody who might have been fired, who has any grievances against, the transit and everything like this, and everything. So, like I said, he was always thinking, and he's always trying to figure out, the situation and figure out who the players might be and everything. And I feel like he was very competent at what he did, and he wasn't overly confident about his abilities. Um, but then too, like, the fact that even with everything being kind of stressful, he still found time to kind of, find time for humor. In a way, under pressure too. Like, he could make a joke and everything, and it's kind of funny that there's a joke that's made in this movie later on, like towards the end, that is that the first time I actually heard this was actually in the first Smokey and the Bandit movie by Buford T. Justice, played by Jackie Gleason, when he crashed. When the cops, they crash and everything, and him and Junior pull up, and the black sheriff is like, "Help me get out of here." And he's like, "Hey boy, where's Sheriff Bradford?" And the dude, he looks up and is like, "Oh, he's like, I am Sheriff Bradford." And he's like, "Oh, you sounded taller on the radio," type of thing. So that same kind of joke was made here, but in a little bit more tasteful way than opposed to what we got at Smokey and the Bandit. Because when he first meet the Inspector Daniels, I think it was his name, which is interesting. His name is Inspector Daniels, because I think of The Wire when I think about Daniels, but that's another story. But Inspector Daniels here is played by one of my favorite character actors from the 70s, and that's Mr. Julius Harris, aka he'll always be Scatter to me from Superfly, and everything, or Gravedigger from Darkman, if you want to go to that route. But in the 70s, especially in a lot of black exploitation movies, I mean, that's where he made his name. He always showed up. Hell, he's one of the henchmen villains in To Live and Let Die, the James Bond movie, which I have a lot of thoughts about that movie. And who knows, maybe one day I'll review that movie on the podcast. But when they first meet officially, because they've only spoken on the radio, and when he runs up to the car and he finds out that he's him, he's like, "Oh, you sounded," and Dave's like, "What? I sounded like what?" He's like, you know what? Never mind. So it's the same kind of joke that was made, but he does it in a very, humorous way here. So another question I would like to ask you guys: this: would this movie work as well with a traditional action star? And I'm thinking, like, well, back in the 70s, you didn't have, what you say, a lot of action stars. I mean, you had Steve McQueen, but around this time he was doing other things. I think he was doing like Junior Bonnet and stuff like that by this point, because he had already done The Getaway by the time this movie came out, and of course he's already done Bullet. But I don't know, Steve McQueen kind of came to mind or whatever. I mean, Jack Nicholson was never he was a movie star, but he wasn't an action star. Could he have been Garber? I don't know, maybe. Just like I said, I'm trying to think of certain people who could have played Garber besides Walter Matthau. Maybe Paul Newman. I don't know about Robert Redford, but maybe Paul Newman, maybe. But he probably would have brought a different energy to the character or whatever. But yeah, that's my question there that I would like to ask you guys listening. Would this movie work well with a traditional action star? I mean, granted, in the remake, I mean, Denzel had just kind of started his forte into what I like to call the old man action star with, Equalizer, stuff like that. Hell, maybe even Liam Neeson. I don't know. As far as like an action star that could have pulled off the Garber role, back then or even modern day. and everything. So let's talk more about Mr. Blue and his his criminal crew here. Robert Shaw, I think, does a fantastic job playing Mr. Blue. Um, he's very cool, calm, and collected. And as I was watching the movie, I was like, he reminds me of somebody. And then it kind of hit me. I was like, it's like Hans Gruber. That's kind of who he reminded me of. He reminded me of Hans Gruber. Granted, Die Hard came out, years later, but because I'm seeing, this is my first time watching it just like he reminds me of Hans Gruber. I mean, he's not dressed in a nice suit like Hans was, but the whole, very cool, calm, and I'm in control of the situation. That same type of, bravado and everything like that. It felt very similar to me, at least. I don't know about you guys if you've seen the movie and everything, if you feel the same way, but me watching it, I'm thinking like, hey, that's what he feels like. It almost feels like, he's Han Gruber and he's holding these people hostage, and which is very similar when you think about it, to a degree, and everything. But I think Robert Shaw, like I said, he's very good in this movie. And this was ironically the movie. This is like the movie he did before Jaws. Um, so that's another thing. It's like seeing him as Quint, you know, is I mean that's an iconic role. But I think if he never did Jaws, I think his Mr. Blue could be like almost a defining character for him as well, because I thought he was really that good, and how, like I say, he's very calm, he's very smart, and everything, because we do find out that he might be ex-military, and everything. So granted, he wasn't no dummy. He wasn't like just some dude saying, "Oh, we're gonna go hijack a train and we won't." And the fact that they wanted $1 million only, and this is 1974, so of course that was a lot of freaking money. But um, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, $1 million, like, and then when you look at what they equates now, that's only like maybe like 6.5 million, I believe it is. So I mean, granted, it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money. I mean, granted, if he would have asked for like 100 million, that would have been different. Um, and everything. But yeah, I just enjoy. I think when you have a villain that is very calm, opposed to being just loud and kind of out of control, I think it plays better, and that kind of takes me back to, again, going back to the comparison of the remake, where Travolta, as he's not Mr. Blue because they actually go by the real name, so he's Ryder. But I just feel like Travolta, he brings too much of a chaotic energy to the character, whereas Robert Shaw is more cool, calm, opposed to anything else. Um, and he always feels like he is a dangerous man, because when he says that if y'all screw around with this, I'm going to kill a passenger. And when he says that, you can tell that they believe when he says this. And then when what happens with the guy getting killed because they tried to pull some nonsense, and it's like, oh, like, no, he wasn't playing around. Like he was legit serious about this. And the fact that they are professionals, granted, they kind of move, you know, there's a lot of tension between amongst themselves, but they are professional with how they do it. Because I love the way they're introduced. Like each one is at a different stop to get on the train. So by the time Robert Shaw gets on the train, everybody's already in position. He just has to slip on, and then they, take over the train the way they do it. And even the way they do it is not to where everyone even knows what's really happening until after it's happened. So, granted, these guys are not like just random, oh, I'm going to stick up a corner store type dudes. These dudes were very professional with how they operated, and everything. So, another question I think it kind of raises, like, a movie like this. like how much of the success depends on the villain. And when you think about movies like this or movies where there's a hero and a villain, the villain has to be very good in order for the movie to work. I go back to Die Hard. Die Hard is a great movie, but it's even a better movie because Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber is just that freaking good. The Professional is a very good movie, but it becomes even better with Gary Oldman as Stansfield, right? So, like I say, movies like that where the villain is really freaking good. The Dark Knight. I mean, Heath Ledger as the Joker. The movie is already really good, but amps it up even more with his performance as being the villain, um, and everything. So, yeah, it's like how much success of the movie depends on how well the villain is. Because the villain kind of sucks, then the movie can still be good, but it's like he ain't so great as a villain, type of thing. Um, Everything like that. So let's talk about New York. I mean, I've kind of talked a little bit about it earlier about how it feels like a character within the movie, but we talking about the city in the 70s. Granted, this is 1974. This is a few years before, I mean, probably the craziest summer that New York probably ever experienced, where they had a blackout, they had the Son of Sam killer, uh, you know, the garbage, just strike and all that stuff was going on, and they were still dealing with a lot of issues in that city. And I always say, like, how the hell did people in New York survive that? I don't know, but they did. But this is, like I say, it's a few years before that, really. But I mean, it just felt like a interesting place. And granted, they show you the good stuff of New York. You get a glimpse of Times Square. You get a glimpse of Central Station and all that type of thing. And a few different other places in New York that you get to see. You don't get to see like the grimy, gritty, portions of the city, but you do see like this is a real place. You do see like the underground stations, uh, and everything, and it adds to the movie, and that's why I say it makes the movie feel very much like a real thing. It feels almost like a documentary to an extent, because of how much the city feels like a living, breathing entity within the movie. Because you can have some movies that take place in a city, and it doesn't even feel like they're really in that city, whether they're on a soundstage or not. But it doesn't feel like they're really in that city because the city itself doesn't feel like it's really a part of the story. But here, it does feel like it's a part of the story, and when they call out different locations and everything, it helps with the authentic, it helps with the movie basically, and everything, and how movies later on, they come after this, they borrow heavily from that, especially movies that were filmed and took place in New York, as I said earlier. Just think about like movies like The French Connection, Dog's Day Afternoon, Taxi Driver. The city feels like living, breathing entities within the story that's being told, which is always a great thing, in my opinion. So, one of the things about this movie, and I would say that also Hollywood in general, I mean, they made a lot of movies, with medium budgets, basically. And I think that's what helps add it to the realism of the city that they film in. And primarily New York being one of those cities, and you get a lot of great movies that were made, and stories that are told, using the city. And I think that's one of the reasons why New York. Because I remember, real quick story. Like before I went, like the first time I went to New York, and being in the city, I'm walking around and I'm seeing so many places that I've seen on, whether it's on TV or in a movie, and now I'm standing there. So New York, in a way, is a cultural landmark in itself because of how many movies and TV shows that have taken place there, and everything. And then to like I say, walk around New York, whether it's in Manhattan or Brooklyn or the Bronx or whatever like that, Harlem, different places like that. If you're someone who watch a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, you see those places when if you go and visit the city, and everything. Hollywood was very good at portraying New York as a character in itself in a lot of movies. Um, and I think one of the things that's kind of hurt over the years is movies like this don't get really made as much. And the fact that that's become like a problem where you've had the disappearance of these type of movies, for the most part. Call them adult thrillers. You call them. I like to refer to them as grown people movies. Like if you're a kid watching these movies, like, oh, that's a grown movie. It's not a superhero movie. It's not a comedy. It's not. No, this is like a movie for grown men or grown women and everything. Not to say, not talking about like adult movies or anything, but for more, I say more mature. Like Heat, for example, is a very mature movie. Thief is a very mature movie. Ronin is a very mature movie. Movies like that. You don't get those type of movies really made anymore. And if you do get them made, they're not really going to the movie theater. They're basically being put out and in some cases dumped on streaming services. And you just happen to be going through. It's like, oh, okay, I'll check this out. Let me see what this is about, and blah blah blah. And I feel like over time we have lost, the adult or the grown man slash woman, movie genre, in my opinion. And I still do think there is a audience for that, but where we are now and how things play out, you really don't get a lot of that. I mean, Jason Statham he kind of fits into that. I mean, because I always refer to Jason Statham as like he's the current day Charles Bronson, and everything. Because people say, "Oh, he only plays one type of character," and blah blah blah. And it's like he's like Charles Bronson. He fit into his Charles Bronson era. Um, and everything. And there's nothing wrong with it because the man is making movies and people still checking him out. So clearly he's doing something right, just like Charles Bronson did for a long time, which kind of made me. I just literally just thought about this. Like, if they ever remade 10 to Midnight and had, I don't know, Jason Statham play the cop that um, that Charles Bronson played, I think that would be very interesting. But I mean, even if they remade 10 to Midnight, it would be very interesting because that's a wild movie, um, and everything. But yeah, but I do think that there is an audience still for that particular subgenre of movie, and everything. And like I said, so another question I ask is: could a movie like this become a major hit today? Could the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the original, if it was made today, how it was made back then? Because, and I'm glossing over the remake, not including the remake. So if they say, "Hey, we're gonna do another Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3," could it? And they decide to do it. If they made it like how they made the original version, would it be a success now? And I even take it a step further and say, well, if instead of them doing it as a movie, what if they did it as a TV series, kind of like Hijack, with Idris Elba, that's on Apple TV, where it's episodic, it's a TV series and or whatever. It's because now we're kind of getting it. I know we're kind of getting that a little bit more now, where we get these remakes and they're not, for the most part, going to the movie theater. They're being put on streaming services. So yeah, that's kind of one reason why I asked that question, and everything. So another thing I want to talk about in relations to the movie, at least, is how the criminals, and like I say, in this movie and in really good crime thrillers, for the most part, they're very professional. I mean, like Reservoir Dogs, they were not professional. Henceforth, why everything fell apart the way it did, and everybody died except Steve Buscemi character. Um, but Heat, as an example, again, that crew was very professional and knew what the hell they were doing. They just had a obsessive cop on their back, and that's how they ended up basically falling apart in a sense, and everything. But the criminals in most crime films, the really good ones, are always they have like this professional code, and they just carry themselves a certain type of way. I mean, the criminals are smart, majority of the time in those type of movies. And the cops, I mean, are like their equal counterpart. Because I mean, just like with this movie, um, Garber is just as smart as Blue. Um, in Heat, what makes that work so well is that Robert De Niro's Neil McCauley crew and Vincent Hanna cops are literally almost like mirrors of each other to a degree. Um, and which I even kind of came with things like, what if they flipped it to where De Niro and his crew were actually the cops, and Pacino and his group of cops was actually the criminals? Like, how would that have worked? Um, and everything. But you it's always good when you have those kind of, everyone's smart for the most part, and everyone's trying to outwit each other, good or bad, and who by the end of the movie, who who succeeds and who fails, basically. And it's kind of what we get here in Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3. Is like, by the time you get to the end, it's like, okay, are they going to get away with this, or is Garber going to actually get them? And I, like I say, I always come back to that finale. Like, it's very good, it's very tense, very well acted by everybody involved. Um, and like I say, the one thing that gets him is because of that sneeze, um, and everything like that. So, another movie that I forgot to mention in relations to what I'm talking about is Inside Man. Um, I mean, that's a very good movie, very intense. In a way, it's almost similar to Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3. Just instead of it being a train, it's a bank. And everything. And like Clive Owen's character say in the movie, I'm gonna walk right out the front door, which he literally does. Um, and that's the one where the bad guy actually gets away. Um, which you rarely get that in these type of movies, but in that one, the bad guy actually succeeds. Like, they get away with it. Um, and everything, which is very dope. And who knows? Like I said, maybe that's another one I might do on the podcast at some point. Um, let's talk about one of the things too that makes this movie very, very good is like how sharp and quick witted the dialogue feels. It feels like real people talking. It's not like they're just talking to drive the movie along. In a lot of cases, like conversations that are being had, I mean, how random certain things might come across or whatever, but it still adds to getting to know the characters, which I think that's another thing that kind of gets lost in a lot of movies now. It's like everything that's said is just strictly about the plot of the movie, where you could have random characters could be talking about just random stuff, and it might not have any correlation or relation to what the plot of the movie is, but it just gives you a little bit more of a personality to the people that are talking in the movie. And that's something that I feel like is kind of going away a lot in movies. Is like, okay, everything is truly just being done to drive the plot. For the most part, you don't really get those true character moments a lot of times. Um, Overall, I mean, granted, you still do in some movie cases, but in a lot of movies, it is more like, okay, they're only talking about what's going on. That's it. Um, and everything. And then too, like I say, this movie, you wouldn't think it would have as much humor in it as it does, but it's there. It's in some cases is dark humor, and everything, and even humor in the sense of tense moments. I mean, one of the funniest ones from this movie is when the robbers then got off the train and they pretty much rigged it in a way to where it's still moving, and the passenger, like the hostages, realized like, oh, ain't nobody driving. It's like, oh my god, we're gonna die. And then the old man, he was like, don't worry. He said, as soon as this thing comes to a red light, it's gonna stop. And then the one guy's like, but all of the lights are green. And the old man's like, oh, he's like, well, basically, I don't know, type of thing. And everybody losing their mind, thinking they're gonna die. And then you got the one lady who's basically doing like almost like she's praying in a way, and just like, what the hell is she doing? Like, somebody stop her. And it's like, it's hilarious, but they're facing death, but they still find ways to make jokes in the face of death, in a sense. And I think that's what kind of helps adds to even those characters, because in a lot of instances, characters like that are generally, they're just there, but the hostages, all of them have little personality of themselves. And then, of course, the whole thing of, okay, somebody on the car is actually an undercover cop, and they're trying to figure out, at least Garber and everybody's trying to figure out who this might be. And it's bad to say it, but the fact that it even has to be said, it was like, well, for whoever that person is, hopefully it's not a woman cop and everything. And it's like, so y'all had no. So even what if it was a woman cop? They didn't have no faith that if it was a woman cop that she could even, the possibility of taking them down, in a sense. They were just like, oh, I hope it's not a woman cop, type of thing, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it, and everything. But I really like I said, I like the dialogue in this movie. If, like I say, everything kind of felt real and natural. Hell, even part where Mr. Gray, gets into it with the woman because he's like teasing her, licking his tongue and all this type of stuff. And then by her being a prostitute and all this type of stuff, and it's like, what is that? Like, this is just insane. But there was clearly something wrong with Mr. Gray. He was a loose cannon, to a sense. Granted, I think that's the reason why they end up having it go down the way it go down, to where he gets killed by Blue and everything, because like the whole thing was all the guns that they had on the train. No, we're gonna destroy this and get rid of this. He wants to hold on to his. It's like, no, we're not doing that. So that's why they take him out. But you can kind of, as the movie's progressing along, that like Blue and Gray have some tension amongst them that we never even fully get to understand why that is, and everything. So so similar to what I did with the previous episode, like what holds up and what feels dated. So I feel like what holds up are the performances, as I just talked about, the dialogue, the way the tension in the movie builds up as things is progressing along, and the villains. They I think all of that holds up. Now, the things that feel a little bit dated, I mean, it's 1974, so of course the technology is going to feel very much dated. I mean, I could have left that off, but at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, it's a part of what feels dated. I mean, he's sitting there looking at the more clunky, kind of computers and everything like that. And of course, they still using the big, huge radios, and all that type of thing to communicate, and everything. But another thing is like certain pacing expectations. Maybe, I don't know if you like just fast pace, because there are a few moments where it kind of slows down, like the whole subplot with the mayor, about getting the money. It kind of slows everything down to a degree, uh, and everything. So I feel like that feels a little dated in a sense, because I don't think we would get that a lot of that in a modern version. I gotta watch the remake again just to see like how, because I know James Gandolfini, he plays the mayor in the remake, but I forgot exactly like how that whole thing went down with him as far as the money was concerned, um, and everything. But yeah, that's what I feel like holds up and what feels dated for this movie. And um the fact that Pelham, it, like I said, it influenced a lot of freaking movies. Influenced the a couple of genres. Interestingly, it influenced the hostage thriller. I mean, because I don't think we get Die Hard without the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. Even though it came out years later, and everything like that. But I really don't believe that we get Die Hard the way it is without Pelham 1, 2, 3. I don't think we get Inside Man without taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3. So like I said, there's quite a few movies I don't think we get without it. And everything, and it's very much still worth a watch. Like I said, I was happy that I got it because I actually own it, but it's also available on MGM Plus and everything. But I'm actually glad I do actually own this movie. And I've actually owned it for a minute and had never watched it like I said, for whatever reason, um, and everything. So as we wind down this episode, um, just want to ask a couple of questions like I always do every episode. Um, so the first question I'm gonna ask: who's the better '70s crime villain? Is it Mr. Blue, or is it the criminals from the French Connection that Popeye Doyle has to deal with? Who are the better '70s crime villains? Um, Another question I ask is, what's your favorite New York crime movie? Is it this? Is it French Connection? Is it Dog's Day Afternoon? Like, what's your favorite crime movie that's in New York? And then the last question I ask is, could a movie quite like this work today? Not talking about, not going based off of being a remake, which already exists, but just the way this version of Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3 was done. Could that movie work in today's era of cinema, basically? So that's pretty much it for this episode. I want to thank everybody for listening. I had a really good time going back and watching this movie for the first time. Um, I plan to watch it a few more times, and everything like that. But I feel like this movie, it's still, it's a cool movie of the genre, and I think it's one that people should check out. Um, and like I say, it just works, and that's what I really enjoy about it, um, and everything like that. And yeah, so like I say, thank you guys for listening to this episode. Of course, I will be back for episode 373, which I'm really, really hyped about this, and hopefully I'm not disappointed after watching it. I'm going to be watching and reviewing for the very first time because I know as little as possible about this movie, except for maybe one scene, and I'm talking about the movie Sorcerer, starring Roy Snyder, and everything. I'm the William freaking movie. I'm gonna watch that for the very first time, and I'm gonna talk about it. Yeah, and I'm gonna talk about it for the very first time on the podcast, and I'm looking very forward to talking about that movie, watching that movie, and talking about it, and everything like that. So, if anyone wants to contact me, of course, you can email me at jmovietalk, and everything. Whether you want to talk, leave comments about episodes, recommend movies or like episodes you think I could do, or that you would want to hear me do or whatever like that. Let's say you can email me jmovietalk@gmail.com. Of course, I'm all over social medias. I'm on Threads at the J Giles. I'm on Instagram, JMT Podcast. On TikTok as at J Movie Talk. Also over on TikTok as well. Um, and then I'm on Facebook also. You can find me personally, J. You can find me over there as well. Like that. On Threads also at the J Giles. And everything like that. If you want to, hit me up or anything like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. Of course, also on the YouTube, of course, I want to thank all the new listeners that have, uh, come about over there, and also the followers that I'm getting over there on YouTube. So if you can definitely support me on YouTube as well. I appreciate the follows that I'm getting over there for the episodes and everything. Do have some new content that's gonna be coming on over there on the YouTube as well. So look forward to that. Of course, you can find all of the episodes a part of the TV Zone Podcast Network wherever you listen to your podcast at. Just type in TV Zone Podcast Network and find all the movie talk episodes as well. I am looking forward to the fact that we are going to be getting House of the Dragon season 3. So I am looking forward to that. That might be a topic of discussion coming up on the network at some point when the season starts, maybe, and everything like that. So I am hyped about that, and a few other things I'm a little hyped about also, as far as TV series wise, and everything like that. So again, thank you guys for listening to this episode. I will be back for episode 373 talking about Sorcerer from 1977. And until next time, peace.